Hey everybody, I'm Senator Alyssa Slotkin. Thanks for joining us. We're doing these weekly intelligence updates where we talk about one big economic security issue, one big national security issue, one big democracy issue that's gone on. You probably didn't miss the really big, beautiful bill that Donald Trump got passed through the House of Representatives this week. He did it in the dead of night. He pressured the heck out of elected representatives. 2 Republicans voted against it. It passed by 1 vote in the House of Representatives. And we've been talking about this bill for a couple of weeks now, but I want to make sure you really drive home what is in this bill and what it means for Michigan. We've talked about the Medicaid cuts. We talk about them a lot because we think by our estimates, potentially 300,000 Michiganders could lose their primary insurance. Talked about how Medicaid reimbursement keeps our hospitals alive, our nursing homes alive, a lot of our mental health infrastructure, even money to some of our schools for mental health services come through Medicaid. There's also cuts to SNAP or food stamps, which is right now $6 a day. You could see people go down to $0 a day or $3 a day with major implications again for the whole state. So just to break it down, because you're going to hear a lot. You're going to hear a lot about what is in this bill and what isn't in this bill. With those Medicaid cuts in particular, what those Medicaid cuts are saying is that now anyone who needs to be on Medicaid, who is really sort of down on their luck and looking for basic health care for them and their families if they have a disability, they're going to have to prove potentially every 6 months or more that they still qualify to be on the program. And I want to make sure people understand why. Why would you set up these new bureaucratic hurdles? Why would there be these new traps to go through? The point of this is to ensure that less people are on Medicaid. The entire premise of this big, beautiful bill that the president just passed is you got to cut people off of these programs and others in order to pay for tax cuts for some of the wealthiest Americans. That's just the math. So how do you get people off Medicaid without just saying you're going to kick a bunch of people off? You put up all kinds of barriers that people would have to go over in order to keep their Medicaid. So re-registering, going in and seeing someone and re-registering every 6 months. Most people on Medicaid are already working, so this isn't really an issue of work requirements, it's an issue of work paperwork, right? Bringing in the paperwork so that you can prove that you're actually working those 1 jobs or those 2 jobs. So by adding more bureaucratic hurdles, you increase the likelihood that people just give up. They say it's not worth it, I don't have the time, I'm a busy person, and they don't re-register for Medicaid. Same thing with SNAP, same thing with food stamps. You know, people right now are feeding their kids on $6 a day if you're on SNAP. But again, this is adding the bureaucratic hurdles just to prove that you need to be on the program. There are federal work requirements already on SNAP. You already have to prove, if you're an able-bodied adult, that you are working in order to get those food stamps. Over 90% of SNAP beneficiaries are already working. This is just making them prove it over and over again and with more frequency, so they get tired, they get exhausted, they don't want to do it, it's too bureaucratic. So those things will have major implications. Now, a lot of my Republican colleagues are saying, well, just have the states pay their fair share, right? Let's just have Michigan pick up more of the tab if they want people on SNAP or if they want people on Medicaid. Just to review the bidding, 48% of Michigan's state budget are federal dollars. So if you start cutting all this money, cutting all these opportunities, the state just simply can't make up the difference, right? If we say we want to make sure kids don't go hungry, or we want to make sure that people who are at home and disabled and need Medicaid can't get their Medicaid, we won't accept that. We want to cover them. The state of Michigan is just not able to do that without cutting major infrastructure projects, police and fire, all kinds of roads that we've been working on, all the things that have been in queue for the state to do. We couldn't do it if we wanted to. So that excuse of we got to let states pay their fair share is just not accurate. So that's the economic stuff that's in the bill, but I want to flag an important issue that's also a national security issue in the bill that just passed in the dead of night on the House of Representatives side. It was getting rid of a bunch of tax credits for clean energy, for electric vehicle battery manufacturing, for a bunch of things that helps America compete with American workers, American jobs, for the cars of the future, the energy of the future, all of those things. There were tax credits that were going into Michigan. A lot of our manufacturing sites in Michigan are now benefiting from those tax credits. Wind, solar, but also battery plants, all kinds of things. And the Republican bill got rid of all those tax credits, right? They said, it doesn't matter, we don't want to incentivize that kind of thing here in the United States. We'd rather it go back abroad if that's where it's going to go. We think there are probably 35,000 Michiganders currently serving in workplaces that benefit from these tax breaks. And everyone from our car companies to our energy companies are talking about and complaining about what just happened in that bill in the House floor. But here's the thing. It's not just about cutting those tax credits, making it harder for those 35,000 Michiganders to keep their jobs. It's about who benefits when we give up on American manufacturing of that energy, right? We know, it's not a question, that the country that is poised to really make advances in clean energy, clean vehicles, vehicles of the future, are the Chinese. That's just a fact. They have figured out how to make electric vehicles, make them super cheap, like a $10,000 Tesla-looking thing. They have figured out how to do alternative energy and clean energy in a much more efficient way. So countries around the world are going to be buying their products, their cars. They're going to be making investments in China and with China. We wanted to make sure to get the United States in the game so that no matter what you wanted to drive, no matter what kind of energy you cared to have, America was at least producing competition and not ceding the entire industry to a place like China. That's what this bill opens up. And that's what passed the House floor yesterday with my Republican colleagues' support. And I see that as a straight national security issue, right? China making all of these things, China being the world's leader in the vehicles of the future, in alternative energy, to me, is nothing good. It's nothing good. I would rather have American leadership any day of the week. I want to flag another issue that came up in the past week. It wasn't in the big, beautiful bill, but it was something that the Trump administration decided to do. They made a decision last week to roll back the EPA standards on how much PFAS, or forever chemicals, are safe to be in your drinking water. Now, for many, many years, we've been lobbying on a bipartisan basis to get the EPA to set an official federal standard for how much PFAS was safe to drink in your water. This was important to Michigan in particular because we have PFAS in places like SCOTUS and Grayling and Livingston County, where I used to represent. It's also important because we had the Flint water crisis in Flint, Michigan. Michiganders understand just how devastating it is when you feed your child a glass of water that makes them sick, right? So last year, or in the past year and a half, that EPA standard went to a federal standard based on science that said, here's the standard for how much water or how much PFAS you can have in your water until it's dangerous. Well, last week, the Trump administration rolled back those standards. They said, we don't care how much PFAS really is in your water. You know, despite all the rhetoric on making America healthy again, toxic chemicals in the water is not something they seem to care about. Now, communities like SCOTUS, who were desperately trying to get the U.S. Air Force to clean up War Smith Air Force Base, to clean up the wells around that base, to clean up their lakes and their drinking water, now are wondering, are we going to see that cleanup? Is that cleanup actually coming to our communities? I have a real problem with that as a Michigander, as someone who cares about what we put in our children's bodies, where we let our children and our pets swim. And I was really disappointed to see that after a decade of work, the Trump administration rolled back those standards for PFAS in the water, and you'll be hearing more about that. Lastly, on the issue of democracy, I just want to point out that we are 6 weeks since the Supreme Court of the United States issued a court order against the Trump administration. Whatever you think about this immigrant, whatever you think about the way he was picked up, the Supreme Court of the United States issued a court order against the administration, and they are ignoring it for 6 weeks. Even though the president appointed 3 of the 9 justices that currently sit on the Supreme Court, he's been tweeting against them and yelling about them and complaining about the Supreme Court because he doesn't like that he has been issued a court order that he is supposed to be adhering to. So I just want to flag that in the spirit of our Constitution, the separation of powers, that we have a legislative branch, a judicial branch, and an executive branch. The Supreme Court of the United States is being ignored by the executive, and that is something that will have to come to a head. We will have to resolve this as a nation, as a country. So I wanted to put all of those things out there. If you want to make your voice heard, you need to call your elected officials up and down the chain. These federal issues, particularly the big, beautiful bill with all these tax changes, with all these cuts to Medicare and SNAP, with all these cuts to our manufacturing tax credits, that's coming to the Senate in the matter of weeks. So we need senators, including myself, to hear from you, right? I count the calls that we get in. We look at the emails and the letters that we get in. We try to get a sense of where communities are on these issues. So we need to hear from you. We need to hear your voice in our offices every single day. So thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in and caring about your country and your community.